It was a pleasant evening. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves in the backyard, carrying the scent of fresh grass and charcoal. I had set up the grill, heating the coals, ready for a simple cookout with my family. On the table were burger patties, hot dogs, corn, chips and beers chilling in a bucket of ice. The kids ran around on the lawn, laughing and kicking a ball, while the dog panted at their heels, occasionally shaking out its fur. The coals were just right. I flipped a few burger patties, the fat sizzling as it dripped onto the flames, sending up thin wisps of smoke. My wife sat in a lounge chair peeling an apple, glancing up at me now and then with a smile. The setting sun cast a soft golden glow across her face. The whole scene felt simple and peaceful. That's when I noticed a figure standing in the shadows beyond the fence. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, but the figure was unfamiliar and too still. It just stood there, silent, unmoving, watching. I frowned, uneasy, but pretended I hadn't seen it and kept tending the grill. A few minutes passed, and the person walked around the fence gate and into our yard. The way he moved, not fast, not slow like he belonged there, like it was his own backyard. That's when I got a good look at him. He wore a wrinkled shirt and old jeans, no expression on his face, arms hanging loosely at his sides. His eyes locked onto the grill, unblinking. I asked who he was, but he didn't answer. He just kept walking toward the table. The dog started to growl, low and tense, its hackles raised. The kids stopped playing and ran to my wife's side. The mood shifted instantly, heavy and tight. He reached the table and picked up a raw burger patty. Without a word, he bit into it. The blood and juices ran down his chin, but he didn't seem to notice. A cold dread spread through me. I clenched the tongs in my hand. He took a few more bites, then slowly looked up at me. His eyes held no emotion, no recognition of us as people, just a chilling, eerie calm. Then he reached for the knife on the table. My voice shook as I told him to stop. He ignored me, grabbed the knife, and in one quick motion, sliced into his own arm. Blood gushed out like a burst dam, pouring down his skin, splattering the grass beneath him. It flowed so fast, so much, that it didn't seem real, and he didn't even flinch. I watched in horror as the blood ran down his elbow, dripped from his fingertips, forming a thin red line on the ground. He stared at his bleeding arm as if it didn't belong to him, as if it were nothing but an object. His mouth even curved into a strange little smile, as though he was satisfied with the sight, or as if he didn't care at all. The blood kept falling, staining the fallen leaves on the ground a glaring, violent red. The smell mixed with the smoke of the coals grew thick and sickening. The dog's growl deepened, a sound that rumbled up from the pit of its chest. The kids were crying now, my wife clutching my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. The man gently set the blood-covered knife back on the table, then slowly ran his fingers along its blade, cutting himself deeper. He raised his hands, dripping with blood, as if to show us, his eyes hollow, empty of pain or madness, just cold and vacant. I couldn't look any longer. I pulled my family inside. We locked the door, the metallic scent of blood still heavy in my nose. I heard him outside, slow steps squelching in the blood-soaked leaves. Each step sounded wet and sticky, each one thudding in my chest like a hammer. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just stood there. I could hear the quiet drip, drip, drip of blood hitting the porch. Soft, but sharp as a pinprick in my ears. The sky darkened completely. Outside, there was nothing but the wind and the dog's uneasy panting. When I finally worked up the courage to peek out, all I saw was a dark, dried stain at the door, no sign of him, as if he'd never been there at all. We called the police that night. When they arrived, the yard showed nothing out of the ordinary, except for a few crushed leaves. One burger patty was missing. They said maybe the dog took it. They took our statement, said maybe a drunk had wandered into the wrong yard. But I know deep down that was no ordinary man. That morning, I put on my gloves, grabbed a shovel, and set out to dig a small pool in the backyard. I'd been planning it for a while, dreaming of cooling off in the water during the hot summer. I dug while humming to myself, the smell of soil and grass fresh and earthy. The shovel sank into the ground again and again, each scoop deepening the hole. About an hour in, my shovel struck something hard with a dull thunk. At first, I thought it was a rock. I dug around it, but soon I saw something pale emerge from the dirt. I crouched down, brushing away the soil. The shape became clearer. It wasn't a rock. It was a piece of bone. When my fingers touched it, it was cold to cold for something buried in the ground. My stomach sank. I kept clearing the dirt, revealing more bones, ribs, and part of a skull. The hollow eye socket seemed to stare right at me. I froze, my hands shaking around the shovel. I didn't know whether to cover it back up or keep digging. I ended up widening the hole, wanting to see how much there was. It was a full human skeleton, lying scattered beneath the soil, with dead roots tangled between the bones. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that empty gaze, the skull half buried in the dirt. I told myself I'd call the police the next morning. But when the sun came up, I didn't, not because I forgot, but because standing in the yard, looking at that half-dug hole, I felt something I couldn't explain. Doubt. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe those bones had been there forever. Nothing to do with me. But the truth was, I didn't want trouble. I was afraid the cops would dig deeper and find something worse. That thought flickered through my mind, and I went back inside, pretending none of it had happened. That night the wind picked up. Branches scraped the walls, making high, scratchy noises. Sometime before dawn, I heard footsteps in the backyard, soft, slow steps on the grass. I lifted the curtain, but under the moonlight, the yard looked empty and pale. The next few nights, I barely slept. I kept hearing sounds, footsteps, faint whispers. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe stray cats. But the noises grew clearer, like someone pacing, nails scraping wood. One night I finally worked up the nerve. I opened the back door, flashlight in hand, and stepped outside. The grass was damp and cold. My heart pounded as I swept the light across the yard. When I reached the corner where the hole was, the beam lit up a pale figure, tall, thin, and moving. It stood beside the pit I'd dug. The light trembled in my hand as I watched it lower its head slowly, as if looking at the bones. My breath stopped, and then it was gone, like it had never been there. Things only got worse. The kitchen faucet would turn itself on, water dripping all night. I'd feel someone standing by my bed, though I'd see nothing when I opened my eyes. The door handle would turn softly, as if someone was testing it. The lights in the living room would flicker on and off. The curtains would shift, even when the air was still. One night I woke to a loud bang, like someone pounding on the door. I ran downstairs. The house was pitch dark. Outside, I heard heavy breathing on the other side of the door. I didn't open it. I stood there, frozen, until the sound faded. The next morning, the ground by the door was marked with long, strange footprints, bare, but far too large to belong to any person. I tried to refill the hole, but every time I covered it up, by the next day the dirt would be disturbed again, the bones showing through the soil. The neighbors started eyeing me like I'd lost my mind. One night, I sat in the living room staring at the yard. The moon cast its light over the grass, and the air smelled of dirt and something faintly rotten. I saw the figure again. This time it was closer, nearly at the window. I couldn't make out its face, just its outline glinting in the pale light. Slowly, it lifted a hand thin as a dead branch and pointed at me through the glass. My heart raced. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. After that, I saw it every night. Sometimes at the door, sometimes at the window, sometimes inside, standing silently by my side. The figure seemed to rise out of the floor itself, soundless, just watching. I began to dread nightfall. I'd turn on every light in the house, But it didn't matter. The figure would emerge from the shadows, always staring, always silent. The bones stayed in the yard, and finally I called the police. They took the remains, but not before taking me in for questioning. After all, those bones had been there a while, and I had no explanation for why I waited so long to report them. The house at the end of our street had a yard full of sunflowers. From a distance, it looked like a miniature forest. The sunflowers were freakishly tall, their thick stalks wider than my arm, and each massive bloom was nearly the size of a basketball. The dense wall of flowers blocked any view of the house behind them. Everyone thought it was strange. We'd sometimes chat about it during backyard barbecues or while walking our dogs, but no one ever did more than wonder. The people who lived there hardly spoke to anyone, and none of us dared ask why they grew those sunflowers. One morning, the mailman accidentally delivered one of their letters to my house. After breakfast, I picked up the thick manila envelope, hesitated for a second, and figured I might as well return it. It was just a few steps down the street, no big deal. I stepped out into the bright sun. The sunflowers stood tall, like giants forming a wall. As soon as I set foot in their yard, the air felt wrong. The sunflowers seemed so tall they nearly blotted out the sky, and all their huge flower heads drooped low, as if watching me. The anis hit me, but I brushed it off and started down the narrow dirt path toward the house. But after only a few steps, the path seemed to vanish, swallowed by the flowers. I stopped, turned around, and realized the way I'd come was also gone, hidden by the towering stalks. I was surrounded, cut off from the breeze, the air heavy and stifling. I lifted my arms, trying to push the thick stems aside, hoping to find a way out. But the deeper I went, the more unnerving it became. I heard a faint rustling, like someone moving through the flowers. I froze, so did the sound, my heart raced. I hurried forward, my feet sinking into the soft dirt. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the leaves, making my eyes ache. I called out, "Hello, anyone there?" My voice was swallowed by the flowers, no echo at all. Panic started to creep in. This was supposed to be simple. I just wanted to drop off a letter, not get lost in someone's yard. The more I moved, the more the flowers seemed to change. The centers of the blooms, filled with black seeds, looked like clusters of eyes glinting in the light, staring me down. I kept walking, faster now, but everything looked the same. Suddenly, something cold brushed my face. I stumbled back and realized it was a sunflower's bloom, inches from me. And the flower head, it moved, ever so slightly, like it was looking at me. I backed up again and my foot slipped on something. I glanced down. It wasn't a stone, it was a shriveled animal skull. Maybe a rabbit or some other small creature, half buried in the dirt. Cold sweat ran down my back. I turned, ready to run, but the flowers felt even closer now, pressing in around me. I shoved at them, my arms aching, my breath coming faster. The air stank of plants and something faintly rotten. Then I stumbled into a clearing. In the center stood a wooden stake, with withered sunflower heads tied to it like shriveled faces. My skin crawled. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get out. I barreled through the flowers, ignoring the sting, as the thick stems scraped my arms raw. That rustling started again, closer this time, like something was weaving through the stalks. I clenched my teeth and forced myself forward. At last, I spotted a glimmer of light ahead. The exit. I shoved through the last of the stalks and burst out into the open. The sunlight was blinding. I stood there gasping, heart racing, and looked back. The sunflower yard stood silent, the blooms facing straight up at the sky, like nothing had happened. I glanced down, the letter was still crumpled in my sweaty hand. I didn't take another step toward that house. I turned and ran straight home.